All right. Well, James, welcome.
Thank you.
For anybody who doesn't know, James is our Yakima Chief Hop representative. He has hooked us up the last 2-3 years, set us up for our very first hop selection, and then the subsequent one that we did this last year. And he's been a huge help to making our beers better.
Yeah.
Thank you all. See myself out now.
See you guys later.
Well, I remember the first time we did it, he let us go, like they put us in like the nicer big ass room.
Yeah, they really
you
reeled
guys
us
did
in.
get the big ass room.
It was, dude, it was awesome.
The room with the
we
the
felt so
outside
special
door.
that day.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
that
we
was
had to
right
go
when the Kevin James, was that right when Kevin
The
James
meme,
meme
yeah.
came out? So we just kept doing that all week.
That was
great.
not played out at all.
It got
during
played
that-
out real quick, dude.
during that 3 days. That
Well,
was,
it's funny.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful.
Well, because Alex has like his digital photo frame over there, and a lot of those pictures, it's like 30 to 45 minutes of just us posing, and it's a lot of you.
It's the Kevin James era, we like to call it. Yeah.
How do we capture this magical moment in our brewing career?
Exactly.
Well, there was this meme.
There was
Well,
a meme.
and it's great. You got like a million of them, so it's like 20 of me, 20 of JP, 20 of Jim. There's like 3 of you, and that's all. It's just you doing that.
No action shots, no me
No,
showing
nothing.
you know, what's...
Nothing.
Oh, I didn't get anything relevant to my job.
No, of course
done.
not. Yeah.
It's all memes.
Hey, social media, how does this work?
Yeah. Here's us.
Can you
eating.
use this?
They have food here. What are you doing?
This is us hungover watching a Liverpool
Well, and it was
match.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
Does this
yeah.
count
that
too?
was fun.
Oh, that one. Yeah, because man, what was her name? And she brought her dog.
Gerald?
Gerald,
Yeah.
yeah.
And she brought her dog to the bar, and we're like, "Oh, these people are cool." They were not
No.
cool about it. They were
No, they weren't.
assholes.
They weren't super.
Yeah,
rad.
Toot, which is the dog's name. Great name. Toot.
Toot.
Yeah,
Oh, it's such a
they
good
wthey
dog
did
name.
not appreciate Toot.
Yeah,
in the-
that
in
Toot
the
wasn't going to
restaurant,
cause anybody any harm.
Rude.
yeah. No,
Just
that
some
is
rude dudes.
You know,
We were
That match
we were
was
definitely
rough,
the most
too.
upset people in there because no one else was watching Liverpool.
100%. Yeah, which we thought so. There would be more.
Figured, yeah.
But no, just us. But
Yeah.
hey, we got the TV switch. So
It was
that's all that
fun.
mattered.
Yeah, we did.
And
we
the
did.
food was
Yeah.
good.
The
I
food
remember
was
the food
good.
being
I
good.
think it was the
remember
friends
being
we
bad.
made along the way.
I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the only thing that matters.
That's it.
Well, too, like the first time we went to, we got to do. I guess we met with was it the Australian division? you guys
James,
had?
Yeah.
James Monch.
And they took us to the rugby match.
The Australian
Aussie.
football.
That's
Aussie
Australian
rules
football, yeah.
Yeah. That was the championship, right? That we were at.
It
that bar to
was.
watch.
Yeah, that's how I'd been there for 3 weeks when it was like,
the
we had been
playoffs.
drinking and I was like, all right, I'm gonna leave you guys with the Southern Hemisphere guys.
Dude, and then we loved
you
it.
have fun. Yeah.
We loved it.
I'll see you in
It's
the
been
morning.
a grueling 3 weeks.
Yeah. I'll
I've
see
been
you
to
in the morning.
Bailbreaker 9 times in the last week.
Shout out Bellbreaker.
Yeah,
Worth it every
Bellbreaker's
time.
So
fantastic.
good.
That's,
Worth
and
it
that's
every
okay
time.
because
So good.
it's always
Yeah.
changing. You know?
Yeah, there's a
There's
lot
always
worse
something
places
new
to
there.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that place is great.
I mean, some offense to my friends who are like consultants, but they're like, I have to eat at the same Applebee's outside of my, Fairfield Inn.
I would
I
take
do that.
Bailbreaker
You guys do
with,
free
10
ads
times
on
a
this,
day.
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
shout
okay,
outs.
cool.
Dude.
Yeah,
Shout
perfect.
outs.
Yeah, I do that with when you go travel, and it's always like if we're trying to be budgety and I stay at a La Quinta, there's always a damn Denny's right
Don't
there.
do
and
it.
It just becomes your office.
I mean,
Yeah.
your
Like, it could
keyboard
be
gets
worse
all
places.
syrupy though.
Oh, yeah.
Which is tough.
no, you get creative
But-
with that menu. On
I think
food.
you mean
true.
your
On day
keyboard gets
6.
delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
I was ended up like bussing tables. I'd been there so long, It's like, fuck it, I know what to do, guys. I know where everything's
You
at.
got a W-2 at the end.
Yeah. More of a 1099, really. It was just for a week.
You go, Cheryl. Did you leave that man?
Yeah.
Good. Got
Oh
real
no,
personal.
he's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Ugh.
He keeps calling himself the manager. I don't know what's going on.
But no, yeah.
Did you buy that button-up shirt?
Did you go get Applebee's embroidered on
Dude.
there?
Do you have a name tag? Yeah. I worked at Denny's. No, I never did.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever could have worked at a Denny's. That's
I was a Chili's guy.
Chili's,
Yeah, I worked at
number
Chili's.
one,
Number one
chain
food
restaurant.
chain.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Speaking of free ads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We wish they'd pay us for advertising. That'd be cool.
Yeah, get on it, Chili's.
You guys can afford it. Your number one food chain.
Dude,
yeah.
yeah, why not?
But
No,
no,
I know-
I think it was awesome. I mean, you guys were, because you guys originally came out for what was going to be our pod selection.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is basically, able to do a selection with specific lots, but and specific hops. So that year we only did it with Citra, Simcoe, and Mosaic, but obviously we had Idaho 7 and Sabro for y'all too. So
Yeah.
we just
It was awesome.
we ramped it up.
It was so great. And El Dorado.
And Eldo.
Yeah, Eldo,
yeah.
Yeah. So And it was fun. I like how it was your first rubbing of hops, and it was like, let's do a 4-hour marathon.
Dude,
Oh my gosh, it was.
I don't have to train
marathon.
for this race, right?
It's fine. I'm glad we didn't train for that race. That would have been sounds grueling.
I felt like I trained, and then we went to, was it Bale Breaker? What brewery did we go to the first night when it was karaoke?
Single Hill.
Single Hill.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to be the dad on the trip and watch everybody. And then I got absolutely obliterated out there. Like to the point where I never met a hangover this vicious in my life.
It's true.
And you took us to the farm. You took us to the hot farm.
Oh, yeah. And
I'm sitting there just like walking off, just puking. And I'm like, I'll be okay, guys. Like this should pass.
So many times somebody would go, like, hey, where'd your buddy go?
Yeah.
He'll be right back.
He's fine.
Yeah, I was like, this is awful. that was an experience.
We just yell turning. He yells point. We know where he is.
Yeah. It was so bad. I was like, man.
Yeah, I was the second night watching Australian football. Just, your buddy's asleep. You're gonna have to wake him up, dude.
Yeah. That's a nice jacket he's got, though.
Yeah,
I feel like you got to tell that story.
Oh, yeah.
So, I had a loggers or football and loggers hoodie that I was wearing.
Yep.
And James, the Australian rep, loved it, and he wanted to take it from me, which would have been
aggressively.
Fine.
No, not aggressively.
No, not aggressively.
Yeah.
Which would have been fine, but it was freezing outside, and that was literally the only jacket that I had brought. And the president of YCH was like, "Well, here, take my jacket and give him that hoodie." And I was like, that is a deal because it was so much nicer than my
dude,
hoodie.
you moved up like 3 or 4 notches
jacket.
there.
Yeah. Shout out Ryan Hopkins, the CEO.
Yeah.
He's the man. He was so much fun. Yeah. That was a fun night.
And now everyone in Texas is like, hey, how do I get one of those jackets?
How do I
You
get
have
that
to be
jacket?
the CEO or steal it from the CEO. I mean, trade it with the CEO.
Yeah. Well, and it was a 3-way shirt trade.
It was.
Which is even better where, it was like everyone was happy.
I was thrilled.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I was just in shock that you guys threw a better Mexican party than anything in Texas.
You know?
I didn't know what I walked into at Bale Breaker.
That place was so good.
Everything was like
awesome.
a mariachi band playing. Like the food was phenomenal, and I was like, "Where the hell are we right now? Like, they're throwing a better Mexican party than we can throw in Texas." Like,
right.
It was nuts.
That's it. It's so some context. It's the Bale Breaker end of harvest party. So it's actually Bale Breaker is owned by the Smith family, who they also own Loftus and Tributary, which are 2 hop farms. They are also one of our grower owners. So the party that y'all were actually at is the end of harvest party for all of the farm workers on those 2 farms. So Loftus and Tributary. So it's very much, they're just welcoming us into their party. But it's, I mean, how sick is it that you get to, basically on the same jockey box have, a fresh hop collab with Russian River,
right?
And make micheladas.
Yeah,
it's like
so cool.
just back to back. It's awesome.
Like it definitely would 10 out of 10 go back to just that party. Just because it's awesome, man. The experience, all the people out there, everyone's just so nice out there too.
The whole experience, both weeks that we went, last year and the year before, were 2 of the biggest highlights of my brewing career by far. It was so insightful, so much fun. Like you hear about all these things in the brewing industry.
Yep.
Like it's always the high ups that go or whatever, like in big brewing companies, which makes sense. I mean, it's not like it's a free trip or anything. I mean, there's a lot of great amenities.
Yeah.
But, being smaller, it makes it everything a lot more difficult. But I mean, the biggest thing that I think me and JP and Jim Jam got out of it was just, man, the variation lot to lot, even when it's like, you have 4 lots of the same hop variety, and all 4 of them are the best smelling version of that hop that you've ever smelled, and you have to throw away 3.
And you have to call 3 of them trash.
Yeah.
Essentially.
You
these ones aren't good.
And you have to have an aggressive opinion about it, and it's crazy. Did you hear about the collab that we did with False Idol?
I think so, but I'm going to let you explain it.
So we were able to pick Citra Mosaic Simcoe, Eldorado Sabro, and Idaho 7.
Yep.
They did selection on Citra, Simcoe, Mosaic, and Strata with Crosby.
Yep.
And so what we did was we got their Simcoe Citra Mosaic and Strata and did a West Coast double IPA, and they took our Citra Simcoe Mosaic and Sabro, and they're about to brew it here in the next couple of weeks. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, we just came out with ours like 3 weeks ago.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, it was really cool just to see the variation in those lots that we each got to pick.
Yeah, and it truly is, it adds to that, like, the individualistic nature of each brewery. Like, I think it's interesting when you sit there and you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe a brewery just printed their menu, or like printed their recipe on craft beer and brewing or something, right? And it's just like, I can't believe they would just give away their trade secrets, when in actuality there's so much more. Obviously, like equipment differences and personal skill and process and history. But I mean, the ingredients is massive. And I think that's especially there with the hops, as you mentioned. Whether it's you're dealing with which farm, which state, what's the pick window. What are you wanting, and then we can take all that information too. Like, it just gets even more specialized, right? The more every time that you do it. With us, we basically take all that information and we can just make things even more consistent. So that you can have a turning point flavor or a false idol flavor, to your beers, of things that you really want and look for, and that people can drink within your beers. And it's honestly, that was one of the great things about, first year for y'all was just so overwhelming. I still felt like you guys were really, really good at, when it came crunch time to make a decision, you guys made a decision, which was super helpful, important, right? Because that's like, it's very easy to be, analysis paralysis, right?
Gosh,
like you're just like,
and palate fatigue.
For
and
sure.
All that, like, it's crazy.
But the fact that you guys, it was like crunch time where it was like, nope, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then this year, when y'all came out,
there
it was
notes.
just you were there was notes. It was
it was nice.
Yeah, it was like,
that was the coolest thing, is that you guys kept data from the previous year.
Yep.
And then move it, and so like basically every year your lots keep getting better to pick from, because it keeps getting the flavors that you're trying to bring over.
Well, I think like maybe like your palate just kind of evolves as well, and like your sense of what you're looking for. So you're gonna have those certain changes. Like as we make beers throughout the year, it's great to have that as a template to go back to and go, hey, we really want to see more citrus coming out of this than what we're getting here, and you guys keep that information. So it's like, okay, this is what this is. So let's look for something here.
And that's it exactly, too. I mean, even then, if you're brewing with it, and even if you say this is an A lot, like you might say, well, this lot would be an A+ lot if there's a little bit less, say, herbal note or something, right? Well, then we can also know that now and say, okay, this is who they selected from in previous years. This is where they were. All of them had a, maybe a slightly larger herbal spike, and we can just say, okay, hey, they're looking for this similar notes, all the positives of this, but want a little bit less herbal. We can now, showcase that as well. So it's so cool. Shout out Bridget and our selection team.
Yeah, they're so awesome.
Yeah, definitely like a bunch of ducks. Like we're all up there floating on top, and they're just they're the little legs underneath the water, making sure everything happens. So
yeah, you guys kill it, man. It's so much fun, and it really has enhanced our beers to a level that was very surprising to me. Just how, I mean, obviously I know on an IPA how valuable hops are, but whenever there's not really a hop that you're just trying to cover up or just use as like a filler, whenever you're like have like on Primo Juice, Sabro and Citra, trying to get a tropical fruit bomb out of it and moving that beer from what it was, or we just released with the same hops trifecta that we do with Celestial every year. And this year's version is the best.
It's the best one by far.
Because I don't think we had Sabro yet last year when we did it.
Yeah, I don't think so. And even then, it was funny because I think the first time I met you, it was like one of the first things you had called out to me was like, hey, this Sabro lot that I've been using was awesome. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it gave us, again, that starting point to really dive into the information and figure out, okay, what about that Sabro lot was so good. So, even, I mean, the fact that you were even using one that you were stoked about and now have another one that you're
even more stoked about.
Yeah.
Stokier.
Stokie, more Stokie.
Yeah, it was just amazing, and we really appreciate everything that you and YCH was able to do for us. It's great.
Yeah, man, we appreciate y'all. Like, we can't, hops are funny, right? They're only in one thing, basically. And, unless the sleeping pill industry, ramps up, that's the other thing that they're kind of
interesting.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah, make
have
you
like
sleepy. So that's one of those historical, like, old school, medieval stuff a pillow full of hops kind of deal. Make you sleepy.
Yeah, no.
I never heard that. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's like when you drink 5 triple IPAs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You get sleepy.
That's why you get sleepy. Yeah.
Has
There's
nothing
no
to do
other
with
reason.
It's not the alcohol.
It's just the hops.
Yeah, it's just the hops.
But no, I mean, we need, and it's ultimately, it's one of the great things about it is it's such a partnership industry, right? Like,
Right.
I always told people, like, getting into this side, from my, my beer history was always like, I want to get into hops because I can just help everyone make better beer, right? Because it is that collaborative nature of the industry. So it's, it truly is. We're grateful for every brewery that makes great beer. We're grateful for every brewery that is excited about the ingredients that they use.
Right.
That's super important. Like, it's
and you should be. It'd be weird to find something.
If you're not excited about what you're producing, that's not a great sign.
Got to use this shit again. Like,
Yeah,
you just know.
Yeah, if we were to come in
yeah.
and James is just like, here's El Dorado, he'd be like, I don't think I want to select El Dorado anymore this
They're
year.
all the same. Just pick one. You're fine.
Yeah,
Move
right.
on.
They're all trash.
Yeah.
Next.
what
Next
do they
far
smell
from
like?
the truth. Far from the truth.
They smell like hops. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Do you like farts?
Yeah.
You were looking for like musty, right?
Right. Yeah. That's
I want to say like the Simcoe panel that we did. That one was kind of life changing in the sense that
the first year. Yeah,
because it didn't like it. The Simcoe, it was so much different than what I
each
would
lot
imagine
was so
they were
different.
supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is Simcoe? Like, are you sure?
I get no cat pee
Well,
out
and
of this.
to be
at
fair,
all.
they keep a lot of the things because you want more. We're doing like a blind rub, right? So
Yes.
we know
Yep.
very little information about what
Mm.
product what farm's product we're actually touching. But yeah, it was just like, man, seems like it could easily be, messed up. But you guys have a good process on scanning the QR code. You guys know right off the bat, so it's not like, oh shit, you guys have been sitting there for 2 hours picking Mosaic when you should have been picking. Sorry, guys.
wrong Mosaic.
Everyone take a break.
yeah.
and
No,
James.
thankfully that does not happen. Yeah, it's no, I mean, I think Simcoe is a really good example of it's we like, I don't know, I'll use the royal we, I guess. I often will say it's like we, you're kind of decommoditizing a commodity, right? So like
Right.
hops for the longest time as just bittering, preservative ingredients.
Right.
We're very much a commodity, just as any other agricultural commodity was. But with the, really the American craft beer boom, and at least in terms of American styles and American varieties, it's, all of a sudden we need diversity of varieties to match diversity of flavor profiles, styles, so on and so forth. So Simcoe, I think, is a perfect example of a hop that, like, pick window and location matter massively, right? And the interesting thing about it is another thing that we always get is, well, which one's good and which one's bad? But the reality is that it's all personal preference, and it's what you're going
what you
for,
want.
right? Because
Right.
someone might have, speaking of that, like, traditional kind of cat pea and grapefruit and resin, like, someone might have a West Coast IPA recipe that they wrote
Need that.
10 years ago, 15 years ago, that's exactly what they're looking for, versus someone else who maybe has a new hazy recipe or a modern West Coast where they want more early harvest Simcoe with things like pink starburst and bright stone fruit and white peach and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, now we can present, like, basically we're taking one hop and now it's like, hey, you have this massive range of beers that it can make based on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I guess there would be some of our, longest producing breweries throughout the U.S. that they're not really trying to necessarily change flavor, but they're just trying to keep it as close to that original recipe without much evolution in that hop.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing there's farms that they're kind of that prima donna farm in the sense that, yeah, like, let's say Russian River is using them, where it's...
Or Sierra Nevada, who's like, we have to have so much acreage just for
Well,
a brewery
then
like that.
essentially then we'd be buying from Sierra Nevada because they would just buy it all up.
Right, yeah.
And that probably happens a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in that also just ties to relationships, right? Like,
Right.
'cause it's a lot of that. What that ends up being is you're working with a farm over the course of many, many years, and you're providing that financial support to a farm over many, many years. That if that farm understands that, hey, I can grow this basically to match a flavor profile of a customer,
Right.
then it works. And even if we're not going that specific brewery, level, like farms also understand and will see the change in the feedback year over year based on what people are looking for within their pick windows, right? So for so many years, as hazy, really spread across the U.S. and people were looking for much juicier, fruitier, less like pithy citrus, more bright, juicy citrus.
Right.
People were looking for a little bit less resin or pine. Things were getting harvested earlier and earlier when we're starting to see a little bit more kind of blending back into almost like mid-harvest windows because people are, brewing much more modern West Coast IPA now. They're not just necessarily brewing a bunch of, hazy IPA. Like they're diversifying some of their portfolio. So just like nationally, we're actually seeing a little bit more diversity in terms of the way the picks are coming through, right? People might be letting some things hang a little bit later. Just to match. But yeah, growers also know like when they harvest something, they have, especially with these younger generations taking over for the 5th or 6th generation taking over, they kind of came up with having the American craft brewers be their a primary customer, if not the primary customer.
Right.
So they also understand if I harvest this variety in this window, it's fulfilling, this specific style of beer, which,
would you be able to
work.
like, talking about window, I mean, how long are we talking for that, like, hops to grow and, fill up a trellis essentially to, like, what's beginning a crop season or when they're planning to by the time they're harvesting? What's that window look like?
Yeah, so we're actually in planting season right now in the Northern Hemisphere. So we are planting acreage right now it's March 18th.
Yeah.
So we will have pretty much acreage finalized by the end of March of what's going in the ground in the Pacific Northwest, depending on the region, right? Oregon will be a little bit earlier.
Right.
Just based on their weather and rainfall. But we're basically finalizing everything. I always say, like, by the end of the first quarter, hops are in the ground and they basically grow throughout the summer. So,
okay.
You're kind of going, end of March, early April through, we really start end of August and we go through basically the first week of October.
Okay. Yeah. Dang.
Yeah. It's such an aggressive amount of time for everything. It's
just crazy. Kind of like it's just go, go, go. The slow part is watching everything grow and then knowing what they're going to be able to actually physically produce so you guys can have numbers on that end of it.
Yeah, and it's she's a fickle plant, so you have to, honestly, when the hardest periods of growing hops is actually the training season where they actually have to train the bines up. So they're individually wrapping each vine so that it's growing vertically and is actually able to be harvested and doesn't become just a tangled weed, basically. So it's, to keep it, properly agricultural and able to be harvested, there's a lot of work that's done there. And honestly, we don't talk about it a ton, but some of the hardest work is actually done in the winter. These people, we've got people going in. Yeah, and cleaning off, the fields, making sure, if they have to dig up rhizomes or replace rhizomes. You got people out here in the fields in freezing temperatures with frozen ground,
right?
Putting in the work. So it is very much a 12-month, a year, business. I think it's certainly there is some relaxation time and partying time. I always love when Oregon wraps up during harvest because the growers will come up and they'll come up to Yakima to like interact with brewers who are in town and also just pop open, lawn chairs and crack beers and look at all their Washington, grower partners and be like, haha, you guys are still working. So it's always a blast, when the Oregon guys wrap up and come up.
That's really cool. Yeah, I just know that people listening will probably want to know, hey, what's that time frame look like. And yeah, no, you think you nailed it on the explanation for that.
Yeah, and I think even then it's, in terms of the harvest itself, each variety has its own pick window as well.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it's
I think every time we're there,
It's late because of
late.
Idaho 7.
Yes.
correct.
Mhm.
Yep. So that's it exactly. So Idaho 7 is one of the last varieties that is an aroma variety to be harvested. So at that point, obviously if you guys are flying up there and want to select Idaho 7, we need to have processed Idaho 7, right?
Has to
So
be able to get small.
harvested and baled it and ran our cores, ran it through our lab. Ran
well, in
it
your
through
cores,
sensory.
you guys, even when you're making the cores up, I mean, you guys want to give it enough time that it kind of not dries out, but it's not as like crazy sticky.
No, I
That
mean
makes
we
sense? Or
actually
do you want it
just-
as sticky
we-
as possible?
We actually just pull the cores as we receive.
Oh,
So
wow,
yeah,
okay.
we'll receive a truck with a lot on it and all the bales. So they're 200-pound bales is what we'll receive. So as we receive that, we'll begin the process of receiving, which is a longer, can be a decently long process. But as part of all of that, we actually have a crew basically going through. They'll pull cores from basically every fifth to 10th, depending on what it is, bale. They'll actually we just pull cores directly from them. So it's a big, like, think of it almost as like a large like puncher that you would almost punch like a 3-hole punch
Right.
into paper
Okay,
or
so
something.
Or like a
So
cigar
think-
punch kind of
Yeah,
thing?
it's like a big cigar
yeah.
puncher. So you basically
That's
punch
cool.
it, you turn it, you pull it out, and it keeps all the basically like a brewer's cores from it in terms of the width, and then we just like separate them out. So they're kind of all stacked on each other.
It's
I
kind
don't
of
know.
like the same size as like a golf hole.
Yeah,
Like,
that's actually
like
that's
golf-
a
yeah,
like
best,
a punch.
probably what it,
Yeah.
that's
punch.
actually the best like size description. I'm going to
Yeah,
use
that's
that now. Thank you.
All right, yeah, absolutely.
But the so basically we're pulling those cores as we receive. We'll all we'll coat them off, and then we'll ultimately we store them all frozen like in our walk-in freezer, and then we'll as we run sensory, as we run the lab analysis, we on the back end we're applying all that information, and then you had mentioned it earlier, blind, right? So
Yeah.
everything has a code that we utilize as basically like a core code, and then that applies back to the bale code. So we have a larger bale lot number, and then that we can then show or not show depending on how people want to see it, and then from that we can also track our finished good lot number. So you can actually I can identify what the sensory lab analysis data look like for your actual T90 cryo lot, whatever one you're using. I can show that, and I can also look up the bale code and see where the sensory and lab data came from there.
It's so cool. And whenever you get to pick each lot, and then you kind of rank your, top 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
And then you can kind of, if you're stuck on ones, which we always seem to be stuck
Absolutely.
on every single one, you can bring up all the data from there and say, okay, well, we're looking for this. You can see the oil content, the breakdown of the oils in each lot, and that's always really, really cool to see.
Yeah,
for sure. I love that part.
Yeah, but I think just going back to close out the pick window information. So it's also really important from a farm standpoint, and as we as our team and our procurement team, Yakima Chief Ranches, as they our procurement team and Yakima Chief Ranches, I may have come across that they're different. So 2 different things, but we basically work very closely with our farms to make sure that we're providing help and stewardship and leadership in that. We work with them to make sure that they're not overloading a certain pick window, right? So like, for example, Crush, which was HPC 586, got its name this year. There was Crush's pick windows actually basically in between Mosaic and Citra.
Oh, okay.
So Citra and Mosaic. So it's one where we have to make sure that someone isn't overplanting a variety next to something that they're already harvesting, because you don't want to pick, you don't want to stop picking prime Citra to pick something else and then risk a bunch of the Citra that you have in the ground that you've invested in to now be harvested
Too
late.
Right.
Or you don't want to be like, well, the only way I can harvest this specific variety is if I pick it now. Well, maybe it's early.
Maybe it's too early, right?
Right,
So it hasn't
so-
fully developed.
Yeah.
I got a 2-parter. Did we use Crush in Up the Scousers? Was that what was in Up the Scousers?
No. Up the Scousers. Well, we did.
We did something with Crush, right?
No, we did. Are you talking about the beer that we did with YCH?
Yeah.
That was Morning Round.
Morning Round.
That we did. That was HBC 586 and
586,
638.
Yep, and 638. So 586 is now Crush, but yeah, it was
okay.
It was
That's what I thought.
Yep.
I knew it didn't have a name at the time.
Yes, it
so
did not have a name at the time.
But I was talking to somebody like, you guys used that recently. I was like, nah.
Yeah,
like it's also the second part to that was going to these numbers. You have to remember a lot of these numbers because a lot of these hops, these new varietals, won't have official names till they kind of earn an official name, and that's through sales, right, and usage. How do you remember all these like HBC? I mean, obviously HBC part easy, right?
Yeah. Do I? Yes.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know because is there like a trick to it where it's like, okay, we started this year, we're at HBC 5379. And so going in January that 80's coming out, 81's coming, 82, that kind of deal. So you're like, I just have to remember the 5 for this year, and then the other ones, hopefully by that point, will have some kind of name.
Actually, not really.
Oh.
So the way that the numbers are actually assigned during the breeding process.
Okay.
And hop breeding is basically like it's a game of failure, right? So it's you'll plant 10,000, you'll breed 10,000 different hop varieties, and one of them might be viable.
Oh, wow.
So you're really not like, it's the numbers themselves come earlier. So we might have, for example, right now we've got 1019 and 1134 are with HBC 1019 and HBC 1134 are both within the concept line, which is what it's called, where it's basically it's we can sell it. It's available to purchase by brewers, but we're still dealing with a non-fully commercialized variety.
Gotcha.
And really at that point during a concept line, we are checking to see, is this a viable variety in the market?
Right.
Does this have a home within beer? But just because we now have, say, those 4-digit numbers, 1019, 1134,
right.
We also have a 638 right now available, or a 522.
Oh, so yeah, there is no like just sequence that you can strictly follow. It's just
it's all about
assigned.
Yeah, and it's what purpose do they serve within beer, right? And within the overall general market. So, some of them we might breed because they have very unique flavor profiles, right? Whether that be, say, like, peach rings and sweet kind of peach candy, whether that be something like, hey, this guy had a nice, pleasant, vanilla, woody character, right? But if it has that character, it might not survive past the number, right? Because it might have failed its quote unquote concept stage, right? Because it's like people maybe brewed it and said, okay, this is great for a very niche style of beer. Well, at that point, it doesn't make sense to have a bunch of acreage of something that fits that niche style of beer when we can also have another variety that already fulfills that, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Would one still be able to have access to some of these failed concepts, and like in the sense that it'd be like just someone's like old toys that they don't even play with? Like when you grow up as a kid, you mature, you don't use your action figures anymore, so you just have this giveaway
Damn,
box.
Andy.
Yes, definitely a Toy Story reference, but it'd be kind of cool to make a beer with just the people that just didn't make it, you know.
Island.
I don't know if that's a top selling thing.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, what that comes down. Yeah. Ultimately, what that comes down to, right, is like the actual. It's like the harvest, Right. So it's like, is someone going to commit to planting that? I will say we keep all the genomes.
Okay.
Like we have the ability to continue to use those varieties for breeding. Continue to use those varieties in case something.
There might be a signature on one of them that you're like, oh man, we haven't figured out how to. We have to probably focus more on the breeding process to kind of change something that we didn't do.
Yeah, I mean the thing with the breeding process is it's always going on, right? And we're talking millions of plants. Honestly, the number, your first part of your question, like, I mean, that's the guys at Yakima Chief Ranches and like from our standpoint, Jason Peralt, which Yakima Chief Ranches is 50% of the hop breeding company, so that's what HBC stands for.
Oh, okay.
So we're 50% of the hop breeding company. So we share our breeding resources during the initial stage with John I. Haas. So that's where Hop Breeding Company is a thing. And so we share these resources for the betterment of the hop industry, right, and hops in general, and ultimately agriculture, right, to make more agronomically stable, sustainable varieties. Sense. But yeah, so I mean, again, you're talking millions of plants, and it's, you know, we're constantly looking for. It's not only fun new flavors like, oh, this hop smells like strawberry shortcake, right? Like that's cool, but we're also looking at, can we find a hop that, you know, can we find a better version of Citra? Can we find a better version of Cascade? Can we find a better version of
How do you find that
Centennial?
next one that, everyone's just, like, I remember Galaxy hops for the longest time.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone was craving these things, and quite personally, I'm not a huge fan of the flavors of Galaxy hops. Maybe I just haven't had it used appropriately, but just didn't ever, do it for me as far as flavor-wise for a Galaxy hop.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, I mean, that's one of the great things about beer and hops in general, right? Is there's every, there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? But even then, like, I think that would be a good example of, hey, here's an introduction of flavors and aromas that are unique. But even then, sometimes what a lot of our hop breeding is also focused on is making sure that we have agronomically viable.
Oh no!
Sorry. Oh no!
I farted. What is this? Oh, don't worry, it's Jimmy John's. It'll be fine.
Don't worry.
Just an excuse to drink some beer.
You bastard.
But no, it's also having like agronomically viable crops, so that if a farmer is going to plant acreage, they're yielding the most out of that acreage, right?
Yeah.
And making that sustainable. So again, we're constantly trying to find more, disease tolerant, drought tolerant, higher yields. Like we're constantly trying to make the farming aspect of hops also more efficient.
Yeah. I didn't even think about the disease part of it. I mean, you guys have definitely probably had some years where the crop numbers, just the crop was bad.
Well, I mean, that's what ended up happening with the HVC 431 that we used to have in our flagship hazy double, Texas with the $sign. It nobody could tell us what happened to it other than it got diseased and couldn't maintain.
No, it's locked in a room. It's in a lab right now.
Well,
back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, probably a good example of where it just didn't, as the analysis, especially as you scale it from like a single sister to like three sisters, like a single mound to three sisters, up to like a full row of hop bines, right? As you're scaling this,
right?
Which each one of those, right, we're talking is a year difference between each one, right? So some hops, when you get up to like actual commercial viability, maybe we discover things that are not, we might look at it and say, hey, this doesn't make sense to ultimately ask farmers to plant in the ground if all of a sudden we think that, hey, you have one bad run of a very specific disease that, those plants just aren't going to yield. Like, farmers aren't going to want to hear that, right? They're like, that's too big of a risk.
Yeah.
No, why would we waste any kind of acreage on something like that?
Yeah, it's just a massive risk, right? To take, so.
And it's like a year-long risk, too, on top of that.
Well,
you just lose
they could
the
just plant something else and just call it a day and hope that batch turns out great.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, can you kind of explain for people that might not really know, is just hops in general. So how we use them is in what's called pellet form, T90. So can you kind of break down where it comes, like once it's processed through the facility, like the whole cone to T90 to cryo, kind of what that process entails?
Yeah, so ultimately you're kind of going from a whole cone into a pellet is going to be the general version, whether it's a T90 or for us cryo hops, which is our proprietary, lupulin concentrated pellets. So basically what you're dealing with when we talk about hops, we're talking about the female hop plant and the cones that they produce, basically the flowers that they produce. So think, right, little, kind of look like pine cones, green, squishy, full of moisture. They're about roughly about 80 to 85% moisture when they're on the vine itself. So you have the external kind of plant material, which is just, simplifying it, it's kind of the bract or the bracteoles, which are going to be like on the outside. Those are think again like the leafy plant material on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Then running through the middle, you have what's called a strig. So that's kind of, think of it as like the spine or the middle part of the hop cone. But then running on the inside of everything, along the strig, and then in the like within the bracteoles themselves, there's what are called lupulin glands. So lupulin glands is actually where you have all of your hop oils that are stored. So kind of the size of like grains of sand is sort of the best way. They're yellow, and they're going to be packed full of oil. So as the plant, as the hop cone grows, they'll actually fill up those lupulin glands with oil. And then they'll actually reduce the oil within those glands. They don't stay there. So as the plant is growing, being a perennial plant, they grow based on basically light is the primary aspect of how they understand when they should grow and when they should not grow. But they reach their peak harvest point, but then at that point, then they're focused on putting nutrients back into the rhizome because they have to grow again the next year.
Right.
Whoa.
So basically what you have is you have these hop cones. So historically, right, you would harvest them by hand. People would, historically, they would harvest them by hand. However, we're talking about commercially, roughly 10 to 12 foot tall hop vines. There are dwarf plants and dwarf varieties which were bred to be only about 6 feet tall, so that they could be easier to harvest by hand. But most commercial varieties, you're talking about 12 feet tall. So at that point, when we harvest them, you're basically using a top cutter and a bottom cutter. So you're kind of cutting down the entire, it's called a bine. So you're basically cutting down the entire bine. And then from there, the goal is to basically strip off without damaging those hop cones. Mm-hmm. So from there, we've got a large processing plant where, again, there's various types of machines, Donhauers, Wolfs, the Peralt pickers. So these large pickers basically have different ways that you're removing the hop cones from any of the other, leaves, twigs, sticks, stems, everything, right? So from there, you remove all of those. Those are basically your wet, fresh hops. Mm-hmm. Then, unless you're brewing a wet hop beer, at that point you would get some wet hops from the farm themselves. But in the 99% of the time, they are sent to a kiln at the farm itself. And at that point, we're basically kilning to dry the hops from that roughly 80 to 85% moisture down to, technically it's 8 to 12. So let's just call it 10% moisture.
Okay.
8's pretty low, 12's pretty high. So at that point, we're basically kilning the hops so that they become more stable, right? They don't get moldy. They don't, basically go bad. We do have to be careful about spontaneous combustion, just with how much oil is actually in these plants. Right. So that's where hop fires and farm fires and stuff occur. And the temperature within these big piles, especially as they get transferred from the kiln to the cooling room floors, the temperatures within those piles gets pretty high. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you basically have, massive piles of hop cones that are cooling, generally cooled for 24 or 48 hours. From there, they are then baled. So they'll be transferred into these massive machines that are called balers. Again, they're making these 200-pound bales that are then wrapped in either plastic or,
well, that's the baling room that you guys showed us, and then they have the people that are still hand going through for quality, I'm assuming is why they do that.
Yeah, and each farm has its own process. Yeah, so some of them, as they're kind of dropping them into the kiln, some people actually have people manually there picking out any extra stuff. I think that was Double R's.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Those people's cores.
20 people just across the
they were just bent over. I mean,
was crazy.
To be able to do that for that long, they were doing that is incredible.
Yeah, Double R's make some of the cleanest, hops out there.
I think we picked one this year.
I think we
picked one
or two.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
So at that point, basically, we've got these bales, right? And then we will receive those bales. And at that point, the farm's basically done. They always joke that, like, everything else downhill that goes wrong is our fault as the processor. So from there, we will then, again, run lab analysis, sensory analysis. And, if we're presenting it on a selection table, then we'll decide if someone picks it to be selected, then then we'll run it as a single lot. Other lots we may still run as single lots. Other lots we may look at all the different compounds and say, hey, we can blend this together to make a really true to type version of fill in the blank variety, right? So at that point, we might blend 2 lots, 3 lots, 5 lots, whatever, to create a very classic, the Citra, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, once the decision of what we want to do is, then we run it through a pellet mill. So some may still be packaged as whole cone to be sold, which would be kilned whole cone hops. Others will be run through our pellet mill. So within pellet mills, we're basically, using a bale breaker to break up the bales. And at that point, you're basically transferring the hop cones around to be pretty much like blended into a fine powder and then pressed into pellets. And then those pellets are then stored in nitrogen flushed and sealed containers. And then all of those are stored cold. So they're all stored at like at least 32 degrees. And then that's your standard now T90 pellet, which is the kind of has taken over as the way to use hops. Now, cryo hops is a different process where it's basically what we're doing is we're creating a nitrogen concentrated pellet, a nitrogen flushed lupulin concentrated pellet. So the bale breaker itself is a much gentler process to not rupture. The goal is to not rupture lupulin glands. Then at that beginning point, you're basically introducing it into a nitrogen rich environment with minimal oxygen. So from the very beginning, they're getting broken up, and then you're introducing them into like basically a zero oxygen environment. Then you got a single pass through where at sub-freezing temperatures, we basically are able to separate out the lupulin glands from the bract material, so the polyphenols.
Wild.
And then from that, we are creating lupulin concentrated hop pellets. And at that point, the creation of the pellets is also at a much colder temperature than what your creation of T90 pellets would be. You're still getting into high temperatures during the actual pelletization itself, because you're basically, pellet mills they're kind of like circular spinning like machines that basically are forcing the material out through these little pellet holes, basically, to create your pellets. So with cryo pellets, we're basically creating those concentrated lupulin pellets. And then from that, again, we'll, package them into our nitrogen flush bags. We will also create 2 different byproducts from the polyphenol-rich or bract-rich pellets. So we'll have like the primary one is American Noble, which is basically we take that spent bract material, we add a little bit of lupulin back in, but then we make pellets out of that, and those are often used for, a lot of times here in the States, like a lot of them will be loggers or just adding like much lower alpha, much lower oil.
That was a question I was going to ask, was just like what happens to some of this other stuff that, like the bract, for instance, or like sticks and stems, like does most of it get used or put into a different process where it can be used in a beer? So
the sticks and stems definitely will not be. That's just going to be composted, or anything that's found. Whether it's the magnets might find a little piece of metal or something that was shaved off.
Right.
They'll capture everything before it goes into the actual pelletization process. So everything that's kind of pulled out that late is not going to be used. It's just composted or thrown away. But in the process of cryo, we will find uses.
And cryo is more stable than your regular T90 pellets. Like you're not worried about them combusting or anything like that because of the process.
No, it's at that point everything's going to be stored cold. So I wouldn't say they're equally stable.
Okay.
At that point you're dealing with basically a like product that should be kept cold in nitrogen flushed, packaging, and at that point it's in its most stable form. And I mean, the reality of it is we don't see any degradation for at least 3 years, and then even then the degradation from years 3 through 5 is pretty minimal.
Whoa.
So it's a lot of it just stems from it's like temperature and oxygen.
Storage, yeah.
Temperature and oxygen are the worst things you can do to hops. So
right. No, it's cryo hops are really, really neat. They're they always kind of seem like just like a compounded flavor of that hop that you're going for. And this year I'm really excited because our entire Citra lot is in cryo that we selected. So that's going to be really fun on these beers to just kind of see that different dimension that the cryo kind of offers versus the T90. I mean, the T90 is great, but the cryo is so intense. And we've done some beers before it was like 100% cryo, and that's not usually like the best. Like, it's really cool, but it's kind of singularly dimensional, I guess, almost. Like, there's not a lot of vegetal matter, so there's not a lot of complexity to it.
You can just lose a little bit of mouthfeel in particular that the polyphenols will add if it's 100% of a cryo beer. You can still make them. We recommend people to use between 50 to 80%. Cool. Like if you're gonna replace a recipe, replace it with like 50 to 80% of cryo. And I mean, when you're talking about like those, that lupulin concentrated pellet, you're emphasizing, whatever you were smelling on the table of the whole cones, you're kind of emphasizing those oil compound aspects of it, right? So if something is, if it's a very like young and like early pick variety and you're getting a lot of just green vegetal notes, like that's not necessarily going to translate because a lot of that will be coming from the plant material. Yeah. But, you might also not have fully... you might not have the highest oil compounds within the lupulin glands, and therefore that lot might have lower oil, so it may not be as intense in general. But yeah, I mean, cryos, you're generally going to have. I always say if you're looking for a beer to have a more intense aromatic pop, like cryo is going to be the solution for you, at least as like the initial test, right? Like that's the first thing. So yeah, I mean, kind of you're emphasizing, the good stuff is really where you're in there. But to that point, like generally the usage rate of cryo is about 50% of what you'd use for T90.
Right.
So, great for yield. You're using 50% less plant material, but you are also removing a lot of vegetal material, that polyphenols, and a lot of that adds to mouthfeel, right? And in particular, I think within the American, craft market and consumers drinking, their local craft breweries beer, a big part of what they are used to tasting is some of that, plant material, because all of a sudden they're trying a beer that's a much, has way more pounds per barrel than maybe what they'd be used to. So obviously everything's to taste, right? Everything's to your brewery style and what you want. I've had plenty of amazing all cryo beers. Shout out Oddwood in Austin.
Oddwood makes fantastic beer.
So but I think I mean, you can definitely do it, but it's just something to, just like everything, like taste your own beers and know what you want to make.
Yeah, make sure it's what you like, Yeah,
we had a buddy, Sean Howell, that was on the show a couple weeks ago. I think part 1 is on Spotify right now. But he went and picked up kegs from Oddwood. And, man, the sell-through rate on just the craft beer nerds getting something new, something to play with on 3 Oddwood beers, those beers lasted maybe 2 days on that wall.
Oh, wow.
And they were phenomenal.
Shout out.
Just phenomenal.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So kind of swinging over to a different topic, one thing we've kind of been talking about with whether it's other breweries, retailers, whatever it may be, is kind of this somewhat of craft beer decline right now. It affects everybody, and it affects everybody differently. How are you guys being affected by this this somewhat of a downturn right now, and what is the YCH forecast for 2025, 2026?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're all, impacted, like we mentioned earlier, right? It's an ingredient that goes into, beer.
Huge ingredient.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, we've done multiple years of acreage reductions to try to correct the, supply to align with the demand. I think a lot of it is also, I mean, it sounds so far away, but, really that crop year 2022 volume was really impacted by COVID still.
Right.
Because of people, sure, maybe the 2020 crop wasn't, was way, way drastically reduced. But, I mean, if you remember,
you guys probably didn't feel too much of a pinch in 2020 as much.
We didn't. I mean, we basically didn't grow a ton in 2020. So,
right, the risk was there.
But ultimately, right, that if you remember the end of 2020 and like early 21, like beer sales were actually on fire.
Right. Yeah.
So, we kind of had a little bit of the rush there, but ultimately for the last 3 crop years, we've had some acreage reductions. We're still very much in that like reducing acreage to align to the demand.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hard things is that because of the storage, like the shelf life of hop storage, a lot of it, like the overall usage of hops is actually higher than what the sale rate of hops is, right? So, because a lot of people are sitting on hops that are still perfectly great, they're fine. So we've still, this year we'll have another slight reduction, but I mean, we also see things kind of evening out and stabling out.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately the great thing about YCH, and you asked about our forecast and where things are like the great thing about YCH is we're a grower-owned co-op, and our growers are multi-generation farms, and they've seen worse. To be real. So it's we've added some complexity in terms of the amount of varieties that we have, but
that's a good point.
We've they've seen worse downturns. In the world. So I think ultimately for us, it's about communication. It's about making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what growers are putting in the ground, and what they're putting in the ground is based on what, communication with brewers and what they need. We understand, I think now one of the biggest changes I would say that I'm seeing, at least as a RSM, is like having actual smart communication about future forecasts from breweries' growth, right? Mm-hmm. Or decline or just staying flat. Like, I think it's, doesn't do anyone any good to just flatter, It's very much like, hey, let's just be really realistic about this. And that's really where we're at right now. And I think that's the most important thing. And, as I said, we kind of see in about a year and a half, 2 years, like supply demand will be flat again and like be even. So, at that point, I think it's going to be, just important for us to not go the other way.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
I
make
think
sure
it requires kind of, like you said, communication and everybody being on the same page. Like, hey, it could come back, but plan for the worst, hope for the best, kind of thing. Like, hey, don't overextend, which was what you and I kind of talked a lot about last year.
Yeah.
But make sure you have enough to make sure you're happy with the product that comes out.
Yeah.
And it's that fine juggling line of I want this so bad to, well, I don't know how much of that we're actually going to use. I would have loved to have picked 10 different varieties. Yeah.
And I think on top of that, it's also like being, right, like trying to find solutions and being flexible to find solutions. So even if it's like, hey, maybe, because ultimately what's going to happen, like we talk about the hop industry or the beer industry as like kind absolutes, right? But it's like the reality of it is like the beer industry is a lot of different breweries. It's a lot of different styles of beer. It's a lot of different regions. Hops is also just a lot of different varieties, right? Mm-hmm. So while sure, quote unquote, hops might be in plenty of, supply, and we've got a ton of supply. Well, that doesn't mean every single hop variety is in plenty of supply, right?
Absolutely.
So that's ultimately going to be a lot of the communication is making sure that we're working together as we all figure out where these breweries are going and what they're going to do, is like making sure that we're in communication about those individual varieties, is being open, like us finding solutions and presenting solutions to y'all, and then y'all being open to solutions, whether that be as simple as, hey, here's another lot of maybe this lot that you didn't select, or here's another lot that's similar. Introduce it throughout the year into your recipes so that you have minimal change. Or it could be as much as like, hey, that harvest was really low. We need to find a replacement. Here are the hops that I think are a great replacement, and let's like tweak the recipe a little bit, to make it work
in
in the short term. And then we'll plan on, getting back to where we need to be, or maybe you like it better, maybe maybe you hate it, but it gets us through.
Right, and I think that's what's so important about having a supplier, a partner that knows what you're trying to accomplish, knows the best way to do that or troubleshoot that if that needs to happen. And that's been just a incredible position to be in with you guys. It's been awesome for us.
Yeah, we just try to, again, partnership, right? That's all. That's all it comes down to.
And so, your services are available to somebody that has a brewery in planning. They can reach out and still be able to, acquire hops and set up contracts and whatnot, right? From day one, is that something that am I wrong?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think at that point, I mean, we work with everyone, breweries and planning, out to well-established people. A lot of it's tied to what makes the most sense for the brewery, right? We also have a lot of great distributor partners that we work with. So there's, potentially the best option is directly through us.
Yeah.
Potentially the best option if you're just getting started is to just go through the people you get, your malt from, right? Your country malt groups, your BSG, and asking for YCH boxes, your, Pro Brew Supply. So we've got a bunch of, partners who, we trust and we hold to quality situation. So, maybe that's the best solution for anyone getting going. But we're also happy, we're always happy to do business direct. We're always happy to be, at the very least, a resource. At the very least, someone to talk through.
Bang up job on it.
Yep.
Man.
Absolutely.
Like, customer service and just friendliness and overall just care that you guys have for the products you guys make, probably unmatched, in that sense. And that brings me to my next question. So there's other people that sell hops. There's other people that make beer. And there's something that is always like dumbfounding when people are fanning out on, let's say Alex makes Trifecta, and they're like, man, this is the best beer. These guys aren't as good. What they don't realize is when they're talking about other breweries, we were probably hanging out with that dude 2 days ago, So it's like, like we're all friends, and that's like the behind the curtain magic is every brewery for the most part that I know of right now is we're all friends. So like other hop producers or farms and whatnot you run into competition. You guys have competition, but you guys are probably all friends as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Same mission, right?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's, again, we work in a, agricultural business. I don't really think you can be, with any farmers. I don't think you can really have farmers who are sitting there trying to. Yeah.
You want to win GABF? This is look at these medals.
Yeah, that's not what it's about, man. I mean, it's about, it's about relationships. It's about making the best beer possible, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when push comes to shove. I think that's what's most important. And I mean, there's a lot of, awesome farms out there, and there's a lot of great people who, represent farms and get those hops out there, and that's really what's important. It's like it's keeping those farms and those families, making the best product that they possibly can, which is holding them accountable to do that in the same way that, the general market holds the beer drinker accountable for the beer that they make, right? Like, so it's about keeping them, on their A game and invested, which, again, if you're, inheriting your 5th generation of your family business, a lot of them are pretty invested, right? So, it's one of the things like, we have those great relationships with a bunch of people, other hop suppliers, other farms, other brokers, whatever it may be. There's no animosity. It's all just trying to make the best beer possible. And then from our standpoint, it's just kind of like, let's just make things happen. We want to do what's best for the brewers, and we want to do what's best for the growers. So it's definitely fitting that fine line. It's the same where, someone's always caught holding the bag. So it's like, let's make this a sustainable partnership of an industry.
Absolutely.
And not just like, hey, let's just undercut everything. Because ultimately that might be, the difference of, sometimes food, sometimes just, hey, can we hire enough people? Can we maybe invest in that new piece of equipment, whatever it may be? So, but at the same time, we can't have too high of prices because you guys also need to invest in new equipment,
Right,
and put food on the table and invest in
very
everything.
harmonic ecosystem for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, dude, is there anything coming up that you're excited about with any new varietals or just
the classic what's new question?
I kind of wanted to see a little bit about. I think the product we were sampling. It was like the blind sampling. Was that Hyper Boost?
Yeah, so that's kind of what in a lot of what's been a lot of the R&D and what our R&D team's been doing a great job with has been the advanced oil products. So the two ones that have really been launched, it's going to be Dynaboost for the Whirlpool replacement and Hyper Boost for the dry hop replacement. So, one of the big hurdles that brewers deal with, right, is yield. On top of that, yield, again, just from general conversational point is like yield being the more plant material you put in, T90 pellets absorb about 10% of their weight, in liquid. So, if you're dry hopping a ton, you're losing potentially, 10% of volume in your general yield, and all that volume is just dollars, right? When push comes to shove. So, that's been a major question, but we also want to make sure from our standpoint, specifically as YCH, that the quality of the product is first and foremost, right? And is it a true example of that hop variety? So for us, a lot of R&D's gone into it, a lot of trials. We ended up with this Dynaboost, which is a 20% total hop oil product.
Oh, wow.
It still has alpha and beta acids in it. It's kind of a blend of that oil and then some of the de-oiled product. They're derived from pellets ultimately, but that one is directly into the Whirlpool. Just pour it in. It's a 10-to-1 dosage rate. So it's for example, they come in 1 kilogram bottles, and that completely flowable, and that replaces 22 pounds of T90 pellets for 10 kgs.
It was remember we sat at the bar?
It was like the 25, 50, and 75%.
Yep. Yeah. And then that one was, so that's specifically the Hyper Boost as well. So Dynaboost is Whirlpool. Hyper Boost is our dry hop replacement. That's actually a 100-to-1 dosage rate. So 100 grams of that product, which is roughly 50% total hop oil, still has alpha and beta and actually has no emulsifier in it. So, the purpose is to replicate if a compound is survivable and is water soluble, it will remain water soluble. If a compound is not water soluble within hops, we're not making it water soluble, right? By adding an emulsifier. So trying to replicate as close to that dry hopping aroma and flavor profile as possible. So within those, that's 100-gram bottles, and those replace the equivalent of 10 kgs or 22 pounds.
That's crazy.
Of T90 pellets. So
it's crazy.
That's so awesome.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and I mean, even then, you want to replace, similar like the cryo conversation, right? You want to replace we recommend starting at about 25% of your dry hop. 25 to 50% seems to be the sweet spot. Definitely want to make sure that you use it before you crash your beer. That's really important. Just again, because we are not using an emulsifier and it's that high oil, if you use it too cold, you might be capturing a lot of myrcene,
right?
Which myrcene is generally about 50% of the oils within hop, 50% of the oil of hops. So ideally, use it. You don't have to use it active firm, but at least use it, before you crash. It's just going to make a better product. But no, I mean, you literally just, pour it straight in there, and you want to make sure, recircuit, get it all mixed in there. CO2 pulse, natural convection from fermentation, whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Get some mixing in there, but no, they're awesome. We got a ton of different varieties, specifically of Hyper Boost, Dynaboost. We have a few less, but it's like, your Citrus Simcoe Mosaic. We just launched Strata. We got Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, Motueka, Nelson, Eldo.
Heck yeah.
Cool.
So
okay, so I have a very important question.
Oh, here we go.
What is your favorite hop varietal?
So honestly, at this point, and it's going to be so stereotypical of someone who works at YCH, but it is Simcoe. And I think it's just because Simcoe has, honestly, what you had mentioned, and we talked about it a little bit, it's the diversity of it.
It's nuts.
It's so versatile.
It's I think it's interesting because everyone for a long time, right, thinks that every hop is going to be like a Cascade or like a Citra, which can be used anywhere.
Right.
You know, kettle, whirlpool, dry hop, whatever, single hop, whatever, all good. Simcoe has all those too, but the great thing is like it also has a beautiful diversity based on picks.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I'm lucky I get to see how the sausage is made and have all the data and everything at my fingertips. But like, yeah, it's what I find I drink the most of right now, or what I'm like gravitating to the most of, is definitely like modern West Coast IPA.
Heck yeah.
Or honestly, I still love me my big old Northwest piney West Coast IPAs too. But it's like I very much drink those. I drink West Coast Pills. That's just what I want. On a day-to-day basis. And I think Simcoe, again, that balance of, do I want this to be a sweeter, stone fruity, just delicious, like fruit like cocktail? I can get that. Do I want that, bigger, resiny, dank, piney? Like I can get that too, So yeah, it's kind of
it's just a workhorse hop, really.
Absolutely,
it's such a combo.
Yeah, and it plays well with others in the sandbox too, which is nice. It's not necessarily
at that point,
in a pale ale, it can really bring out like super bright flavors that you don't usually get with like Mosaic or Idaho 7 even.
Yeah.
It can just it's such a cool hop. I love it as well.
It's also great. It adds a super clean bitterness too, like when used on the hot side, which obviously is expensive hot side hop, but within West Coast IPA, it's definitely one of those that
it's kind of king.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, again, another shout out. It's like there's some of my favorite breweries, like they there's a reason that they feacer it. Whether that be a Pine House or a Westbound.
Yeah.
Like it's a versatile variety. It's awesome. So it's yeah, that's my answer.
Hell yeah, I love it, dude. Okay, Desert Island beer.
Ooh.
Just one. You gotta have one.
He's stuck on a desert island, and he can only have.
If it's not Turning Point, we're both gonna cry.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm on the spot now.
No, not Turning Point.
Just Turning Point barrel aged stout.
Yeah,
I'm stuck there, right?
I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a short. Yeah, here for a good time. I don't know, man. That's hard. I would say as a YCH rep, I feel like a parent with a lot of kids, so I can't really say.
You don't have a favorite.
I can't say one. I don't have a favorite.
Okay.
I'll bring a mini. I'm so used to like.
It's not like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, just something.
I mean, it's definitely but like if I'm truly gonna say one, it's hard to go wrong with Celebration.
Celebration,
right? Like I mean, but I also
so good.
If I'm on a desert island, it's also going to be a little warm. So it's like I kind of want something that's a little bit drier, brighter.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I don't know, man. I honestly, I failed the interview question.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. That's a tough question to ask.
It is a tough question. There's
too many
only
beers out there.
My phone is already buzzing from all these different customers who were like, "Why did you say mine?"
Right. Yes, the reach of 10 people that watch this. It's gonna really backhand you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Will.
These 10 people are gonna be pissed.
No, awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. And,
thank you guys.
Dude, you guys rock.
You guys rock.
No, stop.
Yeah, I was just thinking like
you rock.
No, you rock.
What you told us today it just reminded like if you would have been like when like bring your parent to work day, or not to work day, but to school, like if you had a feature, like how badass would that be if James just went in and was like, "This is my daddy," and he's gonna tell these kids about hops, and this is what I do. And they're like, "Man,
that was a 4-hour-long presentation."
Dude, but it's so awesome. Like if they truly knew, you know,
have the parents in the back like,
it's so interesting. But I couldn't imagine, like 10-year-old being like, "What are you talking about?"
The kids checked out at Mercy.
Yeah. Just keep saying funny names.
What the hell is Little Rule?
He said glands again.
He just keeps saying it.
Yeah. No,
he's saying loop.
It was cool.
Right.
I could see him doing it, and I'd just be like, "Man, that'd be awesome."
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's fun, right? I mean, we're like you'd asked about the other like hop spires and stuff, and it's like one of the things I always think about is there's not a ton of us around,
No.
like there's like we're very, very lucky to be in the position that we are, and I always have to remind myself of that. Is like we're, it truly is like lucky to be able to work with amazing brewers all over the place. Like truly get to talk about process, talk about improvements, talk about what y'all are excited about. Like I love walking into a place and having someone be like, "Oh my God, this beer is awesome!" You know, like
and then you get to
killer.
taste some stuff too. So it's like, this is what I've done. Like this has helped do this, and you get to drink some beer and hang out.
Yeah, and I think
we do the same thing on thinking about it's a lot of work to do make beer, but
at the end, whenever
it's worth it.
Yeah, at the end, whenever you get that product and you just go, oh man, that's exactly what I was.
That's what it.
There's not a better.
Sure, we have
bad.
We definitely have bad days, but it's
you take the good.
Yeah.
I mean, you take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I was like, man, it could be so much worse,
Oh yeah, and being able to share with people, and it's funny. I've gotten a few texts from my wife where she's like, "Your job is the best icebreaker."
Yeah,
yeah.
There you go.
That works out great.
Yeah,
awesome.
Hell yeah, man. Well, dude, thanks again for doing this,
Thank
man.
you guys.
I love you, brother. Thank you.
Hey, man, love you too, bud. Thank you.
I know, and he went to Liverpool. He went to Anfield.
Yeah.
By the way, who's gonna win? Who's top of the table, and who's gonna win the EPL title this year?
It's starting dumb, babe.
Let's go Reds.
Ooh,
Let's go Reds.
Up the Reds.